What's up, guys? This video is an introduction to knife steel. After looking around the interwebs for a while, including YouTube, I haven't found too many good videos on the basics of knife steel. I've seen a lot of reviews online, especially on YouTube, a big focus on certain aspects of knife steel quality and a total neglect on other facets of knife steel quality. So this is basically a general overview of what makes a good knife steel and what makes a bad knife steel. So it's going to be pretty basic. If there's anything that I leave out or miss, feel free to comment. So with that said, I'm just going to get started. So as far as I can tell, there's thousands of types of steels that you could make tools and knives and other stuff out of. It's overwhelming, actually. This video is not going to cover thousands of types of steels. I'm just going to talk about a few. And I'm going to talk about things you might want to consider if you're buying a new knife. So yeah, let's get started. So one way to think about making a steel is like baking. So you have a bunch of ingredients, you mix them together, and depending on what ingredients you use and how much of each you use, you end up with a different kind of product. At its most simple, steel has two ingredients to start with: iron and carbon. Those are the two mainstays in every type of steel. In addition to the iron and carbon, other materials called alloys are added to make the steel perform differently. So I'm going to go over the different alloys that you can add. There are more, but the list that I'm going to go over isn't the end-all be-all of the list, but these are the ones that you'll come across most commonly if you're looking at a new knife. Keep in mind, you don't have to memorize these alloys or their names to find a good knife. Generally speaking, you get what you pay for. But if you are interested in understanding a little bit more, this would be helpful. So after I go through this list of alloys, I'm going to talk about what they actually do and how it helps. So the first one is carbon, and I already mentioned steel is made of iron with carbon in it. So it's the most important hardening element, and I'm going to talk about what hardening means in a few minutes. So carbon increases the hardness of the steel, but it decreases its overall toughness. And I'm going to talk about toughness in a minute too. If a steel has a lot of carbon in it, then that's something that is called high carbon steel. Okay, the next one is chromium. Chromium is usually added for wear resistance and hardenability. It also makes steels resistant to corrosion. The term stainless steel, a lot of our cutlery is stainless steel, if not all of it. If there's a high level of chromium added to the to the iron with the carbon, you'll end up with a stainless steel. I looked online and I couldn't find the exact percentage needed for a steel to be considered stainless. Some sources said you need 10% or more chromium, another one said 11.5%. and another said 13% or more, and you end up with a stainless steel. So assume it's between 10 and 13%. A lot of people believe that stainless steel is corrosion proof. That's not true. As far as I know, any steel, no matter what the ingredients are in it, can corrode, can rust if you don't take care of it, and if you put it in an environment that's not good for it. The next one I'm going to talk about is manganese. This one contributes to hardenability, strength, and wear resistance. This is also present in most cutlery steel. The next one is molybdenum. This one prevents brittleness and maintains the steel strength at high temperatures. Next one is nickel. This adds toughness. It's present in steels such as Aus 6 and Aus 8. It may play a role in corrosion resistance like chromium, but this one I'm not sure. I read different things online about it. Phosphorus is present in small amounts in most steels. It increases the yield and tensile strength. I'm actually probably not going to talk about yield and tensile strength. It's kind of an obscure measure of strength for basic understandings. The next one is silicon. This one contributes to the hardening of steel during the manufacturing process. Sulfur. This is an alloy you usually don't want in cutlery steel. Sulfur increases the machinability but decreases toughness. Tungsten increases wear resistance. When combined with chromium or molybdenum, tungsten will make the steel turn into a high-speed steel. Basically, high-speed steel is usually the type of steel used in tools like drill bits. They stay hard even when their temperature goes way up. And the last one I'm going to mention is vanadium. This one contributes to wear resistance and hardenability. It also refines the grain of the steel, which contributes to toughness and allows the blade to take a very sharp edge. So, those are a lot of names of alloys that probably sound foreign to most people, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. So the next part I'm going to talk about is how do you measure the quality of a steel? How do you know if a steel is of high quality or not? Obviously, if you're paying $300, $400, $500 for a knife, you can assume it's a quality steel. But you can also get a quality steel in a knife that costs under $100 too. So how would you know? So I'm going to talk about a few of the important ways that steel is quality is measured. And there are tons of ways you can measure steel quality. You can talk about edge retention, you can talk about its grit, its hardness, its hardenability, its impact strength, its tensile strength, its toughness, yield strength. The list goes on and on of ways you can measure steel. And each industry kind of focuses on different things. So if you were manufacturing tools for drill presses, you would focus on some qualities that a knife maker might not be as interested in. Because generally speaking, knives don't get super hot. You don't have to worry about their toughness or hardness failing you over X number of degrees, because you can't really get a knife that hot with everyday stuff. So the things I am going to talk about that I think are very important, I'm going to talk about strength and what it means to have a strong knife blade. I'm going to talk about corrosion resistance, because that's important depending on what you want to do with the knife. And I'm going to talk about heat treatment, which is something that is usually never talked about. So let's start with strength. Usually when someone talks about a steel that's strong, they're describing two things. They're talking about the hardness of the steel and the toughness. And these are two different things. So the hardness basically measures a metal's resistance to penetration. The way that the steel industry measures hardness is with a Rockwell tester. And I'm going to include an annotation to a video where you can actually see the test. All that happens is a piece of steel is placed under this Rockwell tester, and it drives a bit into the side of the metal at a few different pressures. Usually that bit is some kind of diamond compound, and the result is some kind of dent or divot in the metal. The bigger the divot, the softer the metal. The best hardness for one steel is not always the best for another. So you'll see some knives that'll actually give you a Rockwell hardness number, and most good knives are in the high 50s to low 60s. So the scale that they use is the Rockwell C Scale. This might be more than you guys want to know, but I'm going to include it anyway. So there's a bunch of Rockwell hardness scales. The C scale is one that fits knives. Just to give you guys a comparison, the Rockwell A scale is used for thin sheet metals, and then at the other end of the spectrum is the Rockwell N scale, which is for unhardened materials, which are supposed to be pliable. The C scale falls in between these two. So that's hardness. The next part of strength is toughness. And basically toughness means the blade is resistant to being fractured. So if a knife has high toughness, it means that it would be very hard for you to break that blade. High toughness, another way to think about it is flexibility. A knife that's tough can pry things and not break and not snap. When you have a blade that has high toughness, the cutting edge is able to be ground extremely thin, but it'll still be resistant to breaking. It'll be hard to chip the blade. If you have a tough, thin blade on a knife, sharpening is also much easier than other blade types. So at this point, you might be wondering, can I just buy a knife that is hard and tough? The short answer, in my opinion, and other people might disagree, but my opinion is no, you can't. Usually what happens is if you make a steel harder, you reduce its toughness. And the opposite is also true. If you make a steel tougher, you reduce its hardness. So you can have a knife that's incredibly hard, but if you were to drop it on a cement floor, it would shatter. And you can have a knife that is incredibly flexible, but you have to sharpen it after you open a cardboard box because it can't hold an edge because it's so soft. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is corrosion resistance. This is kind of a specialty thing. Some guys don't care about corrosion resistance. I know most of the time I don't care because depending on what you do with your knife, it's not that big of a deal. But I'm going to include it anyway. So I already mentioned, as far as I'm concerned, there's no tool steel that's impervious to corrosion, regardless of how much chromium is in it, regardless of what they say about it. By they, I mean the knife manufacturer, the knife seller. Regardless of what is said about it, it could corrode, it could rust. I know there's a Spyderco out called the Pacific Salt. I saw it on Amazon and a couple other sites. They say that it's impervious to corrosion. I'd be surprised if that were true. I'm not knocking the knife. It has a lot of really great reviews online. A lot of people are saying they go scuba diving with it. It's in the ocean for hours at a time and they haven't had a single problem with it. But I feel like it has to corrode, it has to rust at some point in time. So some steels that are corrosion resistant, 440C, S30V, those are two that are considered really highly corrosion resistant. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. The thing about corrosion resistance is if you take really good care of your knife, you shouldn't have a problem with it. If you do spend a lot of time in corrosive environments, if you will be cutting things that are acidic, if you'll be spending a lot of time in salt water, you might want to find a knife that has better corrosion resistance than others. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is heat treatment. And this is an interesting topic because most people that review knives don't talk about this, and there's a reason for it. This might be one of the most important things about steel quality, but there's nothing that we can really say about it once the knife is in our hand. So if you've ever bought, I'll just use an example. If you've ever bought a stainless steel tool and found that it was corroded later on, chances are it was due to being improperly heat treated. Unfortunately, compared to other properties, like when you look at a knife, you can read it has S30V stamped into it and you know the ingredients in there and you can see the blade profile, so you know that. You can talk about those things, but you can't see what kind of heat treatment that blade went through. So since people can't see what kind of heat treatment a knife has gone through, they can't comment on it, and this gets left out of knife reviews a lot. And there's really nothing that you can do about it because you can't possibly know how a knife was treated before it got to your hand, unless you have someone make it for you, which I'll talk about in a moment. So heat treatment is also hardly ever talked about by knife sellers. So you might wonder why, and I've heard a lot of different answers on this. Personally, I think most knife sellers buy steel from steel producers, and these steel producers don't share their exact heat treatment process. Basically, if you own a knife company, your goal is to make a profit. So you're gonna do business with the lowest bidder, meaning you're gonna put out a job bid for, 1,000 pounds of S30V in this blade style, and then the steel producers will kind of counter bid, and whichever one says they can do it for the cheapest, that's who you'll do business with, because you'll maximize your profits. So if your knife company is here in the US and your steel producer is in Taiwan or China, how do you know what kind of heat treatment your steel is getting? I don't know if knife companies have people that they send over there and observe. I know knife companies test the blades over here once they get them, which is the responsible thing to do. But even testing them, you don't know how the steel was treated. So with that said, if the knife company isn't observing this process, if they don't have any control over it, they're not going to be able to tell you, oh, well, we put it through this kind of heat treatment, this kind of cold treatment, we did this, we did that. They can't say that because they actually don't know what the steel has been through. So who does like to talk about heat treatment? Usually the people that don't mass produce knives. They make their knives in-house. Jay Fisher is one guy that comes to mind. He has a really good site, which I'll include a link to. He likes to talk about heat treatment because he does it himself. He can tell you what a blade has been through, and that's a benefit. So the pros and the cons, or the trade-off, is if you buy a knife from someone who made it for you, who made it for you in-house, and they kind of were there for the whole process, you're going to pay more, but you're also going to get a product that you know what it's been through. There's I wouldn't say it's a saying, but I've heard that a cheap piece of steel that is given proper heat treatment can easily outperform an expensive piece of steel which was improperly heat treated. Just some food for thought. So before I end this video, and it's getting long, I apologize about that, but before I end this video, two last things. Sometimes these are overlooked. If you get too hung up on the number stamped on the blade, you might forget about two things. One is the feel in your hand. Sometimes it's important to remind yourself that steel is only one aspect of a knife. If a knife doesn't feel good in your hand, who cares what kind of steel it is? If the balance is poor, if you can't keep a good grip on it without wearing a glove, if you can't get used to sheathing or unsheathing it, the knife may be a poor fit for you. And when that's the case, it could be the most expensive knife on the planet, but it's not worth anything if you can't use it reliably when you need it. And the last thing I'm going to comment on is always consider what you want the knife to do. Is it for scuba diving in salt water? Is it for opening cardboard boxes? Are you going to prepare food with it at a campsite? Bottom line is, there's no knife that does everything. Every blade shape caters to a different lifestyle or function. If you narrow down what the knife's most important function will be, it'll be a lot easier for you to choose a knife to buy. The reason why is when you choose a type of steel and a blade shape, you are giving up things. For every steel type, there are pros and cons. If you want a very hard steel that you don't have to sharpen often, then you're going to end up with a blade that may chip or break at some point in the future. If you want a steel that is incredibly tough, then it'll be softer and you'll have to sharpen it more regularly. And for every blade shape, there are pros and cons. You can have a sharp and fragile knife tip, or you can have a dull and hard knife tip. You can have a knife designed for penetrating materials, or you can have a knife designed to skin and prepare game. The examples go on and on. So on that note, I'll end this video. I hope it was informative. If there's anything I left out, anything I got wrong, let me know in the comments and I'll add an annotation. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.